heart of Essos, nestled among a ring of volcanoes known as the 14 Flames, stood a civilization of impossible grandeur. This was the Valyrian Freehold, the pinnacle of human achievement, a city of topless towers that pierced the clouds and soared higher than any mountain. Its people were dragon lords, their silver gold hair a mark of their ancient lineage, and through its skies glided their magnificent beasts, symbols of an empire that stretched across half the known world. At its zenith, Valyria was not merely a city, it was the center of the universe, a testament to power, magic, and unyielding ambition. But in the shadowed chambers of a noble house, a young maiden's sleep was troubled. Daenerys, daughter of Lord Aegon Targaryen, was blessed, or perhaps cursed, with the gift of prophecy. As she tossed in her bed, visions of a terrible future assaulted her mind. Flashes of fire raining from the sky, the earth cracking open to swallow shimmering spires, and a great shadow consuming the light of her world. She awoke with a scream, her face pale and her haunted eyes wide with terror. Daenerys rushed to her father, Aegon, and recounted the nightmare with a desperate, chilling clarity. Where others might have seen the ravings of a fevered mind, Aegon saw the truth. He presented his daughter's prophecy to the other dragon lords of Valyria, pleading with them to heed the warning, but his words were met only with mockery and disdain. To them, the notion that their glorious empire could fall was the ultimate folly. Faced with the scorn of his peers, Aegon Targaryen made a choice that would forever alter the course of history. He stood before his family and declared that they would abandon their home, their power, and their prestige. Trusting in his daughter's vision, he sold his vast estates in Valyria and the lands of the Long Summer, liquidating his immense wealth to fund their exodus. The Targaryens, with their kin and retainers, gathered their most prized possessions. 5 dragons, among them the colossal beast who would one day be known as Balerion the Black Dread. They boarded their ships, and as the fleet set sail, they cast one final look back at the shimmering magical city they would never see again. Their destination was Dragonstone, a grim volcanic island outpost at the westernmost edge of the Valyrian Freehold, a lonely rock on the shores of a barbarian continent. 12 years after the Targaryens settled into their bleak new home, the dream of Daenerys became a horrifying reality. The 14 Flames, the volcanic mountains that had long been the source of Valyria's power, erupted in a cataclysmic chain reaction of fire and ash. The ground split apart, swallowing palaces, temples, and homes whole. The surrounding seas boiled and rose, crashing down upon the peninsula in a scalding tsunami. The sky turned black, choked with smoke and molten rock. In a single, horrifying day, the shining towers of Valyria crumbled, the knowledge of 1,000 years was lost, and the greatest empire the world had ever known was wiped from existence. Dragons and their riders, once masters of the sky, were consumed by the inferno, their screams silenced by the roar of the collapsing world. From the dark, windswept shores of Dragonstone, the Targaryen exiles watched the eastern horizon glow a malevolent, fiery red, a distant funeral pyre for their homeland. They were now alone, the last dragon lords in a world that had been irrevocably changed. As the skies over Valyria fell silent, Aegon Targaryen held his young descendant, a future forefather to Aegon the Conqueror, and turned his gaze west toward the vast, untamed continent of Westeros. The splendor of the Freehold was ash, but their legacy had survived. Their dragons, roaring into the wind, were not just a memory of a fallen empire, but a promise of a new one yet to be forged in fire and blood. For a century since the doom of Valyria, the world bled. From the smoking ruins of their ancestral home, the Targaryens, the last of the Dragon Lords, had watched from afar. Their refuge, the island fortress of Dragonstone, stood grim and imposing under perpetually grey skies, a volcanic sentinel in the narrow sea. Here they had not merely survived, they had endured, their dragons growing ever larger, their scales hardening like obsidian, their fire burning hotter with each passing year. This was the Dragon's Nest, a bastion of old power waiting for its moment to be unleashed upon a new world. Within the fortress, in the chamber of the painted table, Aegon Targaryen stood in silent contemplation. The chamber was dominated by a colossal table, meticulously carved and painted in the shape of Westeros, a continent he had only ever seen from a distance. His hand, pale and determined, traced the borders of the 7 kingdoms, lingering on the great rivers, the towering mountains, and the seats of ancient kings. While Essos tore itself apart in the Century of Blood, with free cities warring for the scraps of the Valyrian Empire, Aegon's gaze was fixed not east, but west. He resisted the siren call to reclaim a shattered past, for his ambition lay in forging a new future. Aegon was not alone in his ambition. His power was threefold, a dragon with 3 heads. He was bound not only by blood, but by marriage to his 2 sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys. They were as different as the sun and the moon, yet united in purpose. Visenya, the elder, was a warrior born. She could be found in the castle yard, her silver gold hair tied back, wielding the Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister with a discipline that could humble any knight. She was stern, serious, and the martial bedrock of their triumvirate. In stark contrast was Rhaenys, the younger sister. While Visenya's domain was the training ground, Rhaenys's was the open sky. She was a dreamer and an explorer, her laughter echoing above the waves as she soared on the back of her dragon, Meraxes. Her spirit was as free as the wind, her charm and grace making her a natural diplomat. Together, the 3 siblings formed a perfect whole. Aegon, the decisive leader, Visenya, the formidable warrior, and Rhaenys, the compassionate heart. Their unbreakable bond was the true foundation of House Targaryen's might. The catalyst for war arrived on the black wings of a raven. A message came from Argilac the Arrogant, the aging Storm King, who ruled from Storm's End. He offered his daughter's hand to Aegon, but the proposal was less a marriage alliance and more a demand for a shield. Argilac wanted Aegon's dragons to protect him from the rapacious Ironborn king, Harren the Black. Aegon refused to be a pawn. He countered with his own offer. Argilac's daughter would marry not him, but his closest friend and rumoured half-brother, Orys Baratheon. The Storm King's pride, as brittle as it was vast, shattered. To offer his royal daughter to a man he deemed a low-born bastard was an unforgivable insult. His fury was swift and barbaric. Aegon's envoy was seized, his hands brutally severed. They were sent back to Dragonstone in a box, accompanied by a chilling message. "These are the only hands your bastard will have of me." The box was opened before Aegon, and the sight transformed his quiet ambition into a cold, unyielding wrath. He summoned his small council, the insult having provided the perfect justification. His intent was now clear. He would not aid one king against another. He would conquer them all. Aegon's call to arms was answered by his few loyal bannermen, their forces meagre against the great armies of Westeros. Yet they did not have to stand alone. A simple circlet of Valyrian steel, dark and unadorned with jewels, was placed upon his head. It was not a crown of peace, but of conquest. On the windswept cliffs of Dragonstone, the 3 heads of the dragon stood as one. Below them, their mounts stirred. The great shadow of Balerion the Blackdread fell over the sea, flanked by the bronze and silver forms of Vhagar and Meraxes. As one, they raised their heads toward the mainland, and from their throats erupted a unified, earth-shattering roar that promised fire and blood. The conquest of Westeros had begun. Before there were 7 kingdoms, there was only fire and blood. 300 years before the Game of Thrones, Westeros was a fractured continent of bickering kings, its borders drawn and redrawn with every passing conflict. But from across the narrow sea, a new power was coming, a force that would forever change the face of the world. This is the story of how one man, armed with little more than ambition and 3 dragons, forged a dynasty that would last for centuries. It began not with a grand invasion, but with a quiet landing. Aegon Targaryen's small fleet sailed into the mouth of the Blackwater Rush, where he and his sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, made their foothold. On the highest of 3 hills, his soldiers hastily erected a wooden fort, the humble beginning of what would become King's Landing. While Aegon planned, his sisters rode their dragons, Vhagar and Meraxes, securing swift victories against the local lords who dared to resist. Their success was absolute. In the shadow of his new Aegon fort, Visenya placed a circlet of Valyrian steel upon her brother's head, and Aegon I Targaryen declared himself king of all Westeros, a claim he now had to prove with fire. His first great test came in the Riverlands, at the gates of Harrenhal. This was the largest castle ever built, a colossal fortress of black stone whose master, Harren the Black, believed it to be utterly impregnable. Aegon offered Harren the chance to bend the knee and retain his lands, but the arrogant king scoffed, trusting in his thick walls to protect him from any army. But Aegon's army was not on the ground. As dusk fell, he mounted Balerion, the Black Dread, and soared into the night sky. From high above, Balerion unleashed a torrent of black and red fire. The stone towers of Harrenhal, designed to withstand any siege, melted like wax candles. King Harren and his sons were roasted alive within their supposedly unbreakable fortress, a grim testament to the fact that stone walls are no defense against dragons. News of Harrenhal's fall spread, but it did not deter every king. From the west and the south, two great armies united against the Targaryen threat. King Loren Lannister of the Rock and King Mern of the Reach assembled a host of 55,000 men, a force that vastly outnumbered Aegon's. They met the Targaryens on a vast, dry plain that would soon earn a new name. For the first and only time in the war, Aegon, Rhaenys and Visenya unleashed all three of their dragons at once. Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes descended upon the allied armies in a storm of fire. 4,000 men were incinerated in minutes, including King Mern. Seeing the apocalyptic devastation and the hopelessness of his cause, King Loren Lannister wisely surrendered. Aegon raised him up, confirming him as Lord of Casterly Rock and the first Warden of the West. Finally, the king in the north, Torrhen Stark, marched his army of 30,000 hardened Northmen south to the banks of the Trident. He saw the Targaryen host across the water, a formidable army in its own right, but his gaze was fixed on the three great beasts circling above them. Torrhen had heard the tales of Harrenhal and the Field of Fire. After a long night of council, he made the painful choice between his pride and his people. The next morning, he crossed the river alone and laid his ancient crown of the Kings of Winter at Aegon Seir's feet, pledging his fealty. He would forever be known as the king who knelt, but his people were spared, and the North was brought into the fold without a single drop of blood being shed. The conquest was all but complete. With the crowns of fallen kings at his feet, Aegon Targaryen sat upon a makeshift throne, his gaze already set on the future of the new kingdom he had forged. The Age of Dragons had begun. After Torrhen Stark, the king in the north, bent the knee, the Age of Conquest gave way to an era of consolidation. Aegon Targaryen had won the war, but now he had to win the peace and forge a single realm from 7 disparate kingdoms. His first move was to secure the support of the faith. He flew Balerion to Old Town, the grandest and wealthiest city in Westeros, where the Starry Sept stood as the center of the faith of the Seven. Lord Hightower, seeing the wisdom in submission, opened his gates without a fight. In a solemn ceremony within the hallowed halls of the Starry Sept, the High Septon himself anointed Aegon with the 7 oils, placed a Valyrian steel circlet upon his head, and proclaimed him Aegon of House Targaryen, the first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. This act legitimized his rule in the eyes of gods and men, transforming him from a foreign conqueror into a divinely sanctioned king. With his authority secured, Aegon turned his attention to establishing a new capital. He chose a site on 3 hills at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush, a strategic location that had been his first landing point in Westeros. From humble beginnings, the city of King's Landing began to rise. At its heart, atop the highest hill, construction began on the Aegon Fort, a wooden and earthen redoubt that would serve as his initial seat of power. To govern his new kingdom, Aegon established the Small Council, appointing his most trusted followers to key positions. His bastard half-brother, Orys Baratheon, was named the first hand of the king. He also created the King's Guard, a sworn brotherhood of 7 knights, the finest in the realm, who would forsake all other loyalties to protect the king and the royal family. His sister queens, Visenya and Rhaenys, were not idle. Rhaenys helped create the laws of the new kingdom, ensuring they were just in uniform, while the warrior Visenya oversaw the protection of the capital and the king himself. But Aegon knew he needed a symbol, a powerful and undeniable statement of his absolute authority. He decreed the creation of a new throne, one forged from the very swords of the lords and kings who had surrendered to him during the conquest. 1,000 blades were brought to the site of the future Red Keep. Under Aegon's command, Balerion the Black Dread unleashed his fiery breath upon the pile of steel. For 59 days, the dragon's fire melted and fused the swords, while blacksmiths hammered the molten, glowing metal into a monstrous, asymmetrical seat of power. The resulting iron throne was a twisted mass of barbs, sharp edges and jagged points, a throne upon which no king could sit comfortably. It was a constant, deliberate reminder that a ruler should never rest easy. As Aegon the Targaryen took his seat for the first time, the message was clear to all. One king now ruled Westeros, and his reign, forged in fire, was absolute.